A brand new VR game has grabbed the attention of the world of weebs. Kirito, a beta tester for the SAO universe, has traded in his real-world existence for his now virtual reality. But on the long-awaited launch day, the creator slammed the door, trapping everyone inside. Now this shut-in must defeat the boss and clear the game to get free. It all begins when the hyperrealistic VR game called Sword Art Online has been launched. Kirito logs into the game using his nerve gear. Once he sets foot into the beginning town, he starts zooming around like a budget flash until a fellow player corners him. The guy's name is Klein, and he could smell the gamer sweat on Kirito, guessing he was a beta tester, and begs him to be his senpai. Outside of town, Kirito watches him struggling against your basic boar.
Oh! Somebody! Oh! He needs some milk!
After Klein gets assaulted in the Crown Jewels, Kirito figures that Klein probably makes gameplay videos for IGN. So he shows him how to attack properly by tossing a stone at a boar, which allows Klein to understand what he has to do and take out his first monster. After a bit of hunting, Klein decides to leave since he's hungry. Before he does, he asks Kirito if he'd like to meet some of his friends later on, but the ever-awkward Kirito does not answer. But either way, Klein thanks him for the assistance, and he opens up his menu to log out, only to discover both of them are stuck here. Klein starts freaking out, and the two of them try to figure out another way to leave. At first, they believe it's just a bug, but then a giant bell starts to ring, and all the players get teleported to a plaza. From there, red warning signs cover up the sky, and some blood thing drips from it, which spawns the game master. The hooded guy introduces himself as Kayaba Akihiko, the creator of the game. He explains that the missing logout button is not a bug, and no one on the outside can take off their nerve gear. If that were to happen, the headset would basically fry the wearer's brains and kill them. At the same time, he also switched things up from peaceful mode to Dark Souls difficulty, saying that the headset will also cook the player's brain if they die in the game. But in order to escape, they'll have to clear all 100 floors of the game. Before anything else, he gives each of the players a mirror which makes them all glow in a bright light and exposes the true identities of all the basement dwellers in the game. So with that, Akihiko wishes everyone luck and peace out. With everyone now freaking out after hearing how their beloved game is now a death trap, Kirito asks Klein to follow him to the next village. But Klein doesn't want to spend his entire journey with the desperate smell of an incel gamer. Plus, he wants to check on his friends in the plaza, a problem Kirito will never have. So he leaves the area, while Kirito runs the other way. 1 month later, the players hold a meeting on how to defeat the first floor boss. The organizer, Diable, announces that they'll have to group up into parties of 6, and Kirito begins to panic since no one wants to team up with him because of how long it has been since he last showered. But then, he spots a hooded girl sitting all alone and decides to take his shot like Steph Curry. Even though he's destined to remain a virgin, Kirito decides to rizz her up. But luckily for him, she doesn't mind his gamer aroma and agrees to form a party with him. Once she accepts the party invite, Kirito looks at her health bar and discovers that her name is Asuna. The parties have formed, but a player named Kiba interrupts the meeting. He demands that the beta testers apologize to all the people who've died and surrender everything they have. Because the beta testers knew how the game worked, they abandoned the newbies to take all the good stuff to get stronger, quicker. Kirito begins to panic, but a huge player named Agile speaks up. He reveals a guidebook that the item shop was giving for free and adds that all the info in it was from the beta players. So he sits Kiba's Winnie cakes down since they have more important things to deal with than a major skill issue. After the meeting, touch-starved Kirito goes to sit with Asuna, who's eating some bread alone. Since he smells like dirt, Asuna creates some personal space. After that, Kirito offers her some of his cream. I mean butter. He offers butter for her bread, and she gobbles it down after having a taste. She then mentions how she wishes not to lose herself to the game, no matter what, and Kirito tells her to do her best. They reach the boss room the next day and go straight into battle. Kirito goes to parry the minions while Asuna finishes them off. From her skill, he realizes that she's a true gamer just like him, which explains why she didn't turn him down at first sight. The boss gets to low HP, so it ditches its axe and shield. Diable charges to finish it off, but the monster switches to his final phase but draws a different weapon than expected and knocks Diable on his ass. Kirito rushes to him and offers a health potion, but Diable rejects it since it's what he deserves for trying to steal all the XP and loot. So he tells Kirito to save everyone as he fades away. Now with their leader dead, Kirito and Asuna charge at the boss, using their same parry and switch strategy. But the monster quickly recovers and slashes off Asuna's robe. However, she still charges up her sword and attacks the monster, while Kirito's other sword charges up after seeing Asuna's face.
Part of my body is risen.
The two of them continue attacking the boss, but useless Kirito is sent flying. Just as it's about to finish him, Agile and some other players show up to assist. But the monster takes care of them like pop-up NPCs. The fat dog boss leaps into the air to end Agile, but Kirito knocks its bowling ball-looking cakes across the room, allowing him and Asuna to finally finish it off. The players begin celebrating the victory, and Kirito gets a Code of Midnight as the last attack bonus. Everyone applauds Kirito for his performance, but Salty Kiba gets angry about this and figuring out that Kirito is a beta player. At first, Kirito starts panicking about what to do, but then he starts laughing like he's gone crazy and says that he's built different than the other beta testers. From there, everyone starts calling him a beta test cheater, then a beater. But Kirito is fine with it because it's what he does to his pipe every night. So he puts on his new drip and bounces off. Asuna chases after him, wanting some of his cream again. But this useless MC dissolves his party and tells Asuna to find someone else. Sometime later, Kirito is hanging with a guild called the Moonlit Black Cats after saving their tails. One of the members, Keita, asks Kirito about his level, but he lies saying he's around level 20. With how skilled Kirito is, Keita asks him to join the guild to also teach one of their members, Sashi, how to use a sword. Of course, now that he's seen a new baddie to play with, Kirito agrees to join their guild. Later that night, Kirito steps out and sees a bunch of players battling wolf monsters, including Klein. After taking out a monster, Klein notices Kirito aura farming. Not far from him, he finds out that Kirito is also in a guild, and Kirito just keeps on aura farming and walks by him. When he teleports back, Kirito receives a message from Keita asking him to help find Sashi. So he fires up his tracking ability and uses it to follow her footprints. He finds Sashi sitting all depressed under a bridge. She expresses how she's losing her life foolishly. Being the man that he is, Kirito reassures her that he's ready to protect his new baby girl with everything he's got, and she's comforted to hear his words. The next day, Klein teleports to the town of Beginnings, and the other guild members decide to farm some loot in one of the higher floors. At first, things are going well for them, and they find a hidden room. Once the door opens up, this one player forgets the hidden rule of RPGs and rushes to open the treasure chest in the room. As soon as he does, the room goes on lockdown and prevents them from teleporting, and a bunch of monsters ambush the team. As the players do their best to fight back, the monsters mine the first victim like a Minecraft block. From there, each of the players gets sent to Jesus one after the other, one by one. Kirito was also fighting to keep his neck connected to his body. He noticed his new baby girl was getting her cakes whooped. Sashi doesn't make it out of that fight. It's Christmas in the game, but Kirito is nowhere near jolly for the season. He learns from an information broker that the event boss for Christmas will show up later at night under a certain fir tree. So he heads out, ready to end the boss that hasn't even appeared yet. The boss of the event will drop an item that can revive a player, so he intends to defeat the boss alone and get the item to get Sashi back. As he charges ahead, Kirito runs into Klein and his group. Klein tries to talk him out of going for the boss alone, but Kirito refuses to listen to what he has to say. Shortly, a bunch of players from a different guild show up, and they're also there for the same revive item. So Klein volunteers to hold them off while Kirito goes to handle the boss. Kirito approaches the tree, and not long after, a cracked-up zombie-looking Santa drops from the sky. So Kirito gets down to business with him. After a while, Kirito comes back with the revival item, looking all gloomy, and tosses it over to Klein. Klein checks the item's description and discovers that it can only be used within 10 seconds after a player's death. As Kirito leaves disappointed, Klein grabs onto his coat, telling him to live on, but Kirito doesn't say anything to that and leaves. Later on, Kirito is all bummed out in his room until he spots a gift from Sashi. He checks it out and sees that Sashi left an audio message in a diamond-looking device. In the message, she knew that Kirito would take all the blame if she died, so she told him to keep doing his best to live on and see how the game world would end. After hearing her words, Kirito starts the waterworks and finally realizes that her final words before she died were, "Thank you, farewell." Away from sad boy life, we meet a beast tamer girl named Silica, who just had a fight with her red-haired teammate and leaves the team. Not long after that, she's ambushed by some red-assed apes and gets smacked into a tree. The monster comes in to deliver the finishing blow, but Silica's pet, Pina, takes the blow and gets sent to animal heaven. As Silica accepts her fate, the monsters are suddenly defeated by our MC Kirito. Silica, still heartbroken by her precious Pina's passing, manages to thank Kirito for saving her. He tells her to check the feather dropped by her pet and discovers it's Pina's soul. So, Kirito reveals that there's an item on the 47th floor that can revive Pina. However, pets can only be revived within 3 days after they die. So he volunteers to go with her and trades some better equipment with her in exchange for some money. The two of them arrive at a town, and they run into Silica's teammates, including the red-haired one named Rosalia. After a not-so-nice encounter, Kirito educates Silica about the game's honor system. Players start out with green indicators, but if they commit a crime, it turns orange, and the player killers have red indicators. The next day, both of them arrive at the 47th floor, and they head on their way. Just as they head for the Hill of Memories, Silica gets snatched away by some plant monsters, while she struggles to deny the viewers any fan service. But eventually, she hacks away the monster's vines and kills it. After that, they head for their destination, slaying monsters, and Kirito shares a bit of his backstory of how he grew up with his cousin. As they move on, Silica steps into an area, and a monster straight out of Kirito's search history captures her. But he quickly slays the monster because he doesn't want anyone to know he do be freaky like that. Eventually, they get to the Flower of Revival. Once they acquire it, they head back to town to revive Pina there. But on the way back, they're confronted by Rosalia, who wants to steal the revival flower from them. It turns out she's the leader of a guild of orange players called Titan's Hand, but Kirito has actually been hunting for her after she wiped out a guild. With the snap of her finger, her fellow crewmates show up, and Kirito decides to solo them all. From his coat, they recognize him as the black swordsman who's a frontliner. Either way, they all try to jump him at once, but Kirito stands there and tanks the damage because they're doing so little damage that they can't get past his regeneration ability. In the end, Kirito uses a gateway crystal to take the entire group to prison. Later, in Silica's room, Kirito apologizes to Silica for using her as bait, but Silica doesn't see a problem with it. Then, she uses the flower to revive her precious little Pina. Meanwhile, onto the 56th floor, Kirito's first love, Asuna, is back, and now she's the ruthless vice commander of the Knights of Blood. They're currently working out a plan of how to take down the boss, and she suggests letting it attack the NPCs while they use the chance to attack. However, Kirito is not feeling it. But Asuna puts on her bossy pants, telling him that the NPCs can just respawn anyway. Later, Kirito is chilling in a field when Asuna rolls up to drag his lazy cakes back to work. But Kirito isn't ready to let go of this perfect afternoon and somehow convinces the stress ball to just relax. After a quick nap, he finds her sleeping beside him and runs through a series of well-cultured scenarios in his mind. Some time later, Asuna finally wakes up and spots Kirito sitting on the nearby wall. Her first reaction is to draw her sword to carve up some Kirito, but she quickly pulls herself together and offers to buy him dinner out of appreciation for watching over her. At the restaurant, they talk about how players are killing each other in their sleep through sleep PKs. Normally, players can't harm each other in safe areas, except through duels. But some players are abusing this system by using a sleeping person's finger to accept a duel without their consent, and killing them that way. Not long after, they hear a scream and rush to find a player hanging from a noose and stabbed with a spear. But despite the attempts to rescue the player, he disintegrates out of this world, leaving the spear behind. So Kirito begins searching for anyone who has the duel winner banner over their head. Kirito and Asuna inspect the scene, and with how the murder was carried out, they both decide to stay and investigate. They stand before the crowd that gathered, asking if anyone saw what happened, and a girl named Yoko steps up. She reveals that the person who was killed was Kynes, and they were previously members of the same guild. After they walk the girl home, Kirito and Asuna decide to learn where the spear came from, so they go to visit Agil the merchant. They present the weapon to him, and he reveals that the spear was made by a person named Grimlock. Ready to get to work, they visit Yoko the next day to ask who Grimlock is. She reveals that he was another member of her guild called the Golden Apple. 6 months ago, their team defeated a monster and dropped a ring that increases agility by 20 points. In the end, the team decided to vote on whether they should sell it or not. 5 of the members voted to sell the ring, while Kynes, Yoko, and a tank named Schmidt opposed. So, the guild's leader, Griselda, left to sell the ring, but she died on the way to do that. Since Grimlock was Griselda's husband, they believe that he's after those who opposed selling the ring, since they could have killed Griselda to collect it. Later on, they get in contact with Schmidt and inform him about Kynes' murder. Schmidt and Yoko begin to freak out about the whole matter, and Yoko backs up towards the window. Then out of nowhere, she gets stabbed in the back with a dagger and falls out the window straight into the hands of her maker. Kirito rushes to the window and spots a hooded figure in the distance. Without wasting any time, he runs to the rooftop, Naruto style, to catch whoever it is. But the suspect escapes using a teleportation crystal. After that, Kirito returns, and Schmidt starts losing it, thinking it's Griselda's ghost that's after him. Kirito and Asuna try to figure out who's responsible for the murders, and Asuna hands him a sandwich. As this dumb and broken C was munching down the sandwich, Asuna told him that she's the one who made the sandwich. Kirito was damn surprised at first, but then got disappointed when he realized that he couldn't eat the one who made the sandwich, too. But Asuna stomps her foot, causing Kirito to accidentally drop his sandwich, and it shatters the same way as the player death animation. From there, Kirito suddenly realizes that Yoko and Kynes were not actually killed, and what they saw was something else. Meanwhile, Schmidt goes to Griselda's grave to beg for forgiveness. Then a couple of people in hoods approach him and make him confess to what he did. He reveals that he got some instructions in a note telling him to save the Gateway Crystal's destination and put it in their guild storage. Then the people in the cloaks reveal themselves to be Kynes and Yoko, and they recorded everything Schmidt just said. On the other hand, Kirito realizes that Kynes and Yoko didn't die, but it was their outfits that were being damaged by the weapons that pierced them. The moment the outfit was destroyed, they used a teleportation crystal to escape at the perfect moment, so they staged the whole thing to find out who's responsible for the ring incident. As for the Golden Apple members, Schmidt proves his innocence, but shortly, they're ambushed by the Laughing Coffin, a guild of player killers. One of the members goes to kill Schmidt with his cleaver, but Kirito arrives on a horse and forces the guild to retreat. Thanks to some discussion he had with Asuna about the marriage system, Kirito realized that Grimlock actually stole the ring since players share inventories when they get married, and when one dies, the other inherits all the items of their spouse. On top of that, he was also the one who gave Schmidt the mystery note and hired red players to kill Griselda. Speaking of the devil, Asuna arrives with Grimlock, and his former guildmates question why he would kill his wife. He explains how Griselda was much happier in the game than in the real world, so he killed her out of fear that she would eventually dump him. Asuna calls his reason complete BS, saying that he just wanted to possess her. Her words hit him so hard that he drops to his knees, and the Golden Apple members seize him. With that out of the way, Kirito and Asuna take their leave, but they briefly see Griselda's ghost by her grave, smiling at them. A bit later, Kirito goes to meet Lisbeth the blacksmith and asks for a custom-made weapon. She asks for the stat range he's looking for, so Kirito presents his big black sword called the Elucidator. Since it's a pretty rare sword, she gives Kirito her best creation to try out. But he decides to test it by striking the sword against the Elucidator. and Lisbeth's ultimate creation is broken just like that. Of course, she gets pretty pissed off about it and orders Kirito to take her to get materials for an even stronger sword. The metal she's looking for is to be obtained from a dragon on the 55th floor, so Kirito decides to retrieve it on his own. However, Lisbeth adds that a master blacksmith is needed to actually harvest the metal, and they both head out to get the goods. When they arrive at the dragon's lair, Kirito tells Lisbeth to get her teleport crystal ready and to hide behind the crystals in the area. Then the dragon awakens and unleashes its ice breath, but Kirito defends himself like a true aura farmer. Lisbeth gets a feel of his skill as he battles the dragon, until he slices off one of its hands. Then she steps out of her hiding spot, causing the dragon to spot her and blow her into a massive pit. But Kirito manages to grab her in time, and they both fall down together. Luckily, they survive the fall, but they're unable to get out of the pit. They spend the night there, and just like that, Kirito manages to rizz up another girl. The next day, Kirito digs through the snow and finds the metal they came for. Just as they did, the dragon swoops in. Kirito carries Lisbeth, does a running wall backflip onto the dragon, and they both get launched into the sky. In the air, Lisbeth says she's falling for Kirito, but he just can't quite hear a word of it. Eventually, Kirito escorts her back to the shop with the metal, and Lisbeth heads straight to work. After a while of hammering, she creates a sword named Dark Repulsor. Instead of charging him for it, she asks Kirito to make her his exclusive blacksmith. As she tries to confess her love for him, Asuna appears and ruins the moment.
Hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on.
And it's at that's when Lisbeth realizes she's the third wheel. So she quickly plays off her heartbreak and runs away. Later on, Kirito finds Lisbeth near a river where she's all sad and thanks her for the time they spent together. She expresses how she felt during their adventure and also tells Kirito to tell Asuna the same thing he told her. In the end, she offers to help out with his equipment whenever he needs anything. 2 years passed after the game started, and Kirito bags some magic rabbit on the 74th floor. He takes its meat to Agile and is surprised that Kirito is selling the S-class rare item. He advises Kirito to cook it instead, but since his cooking skill level is about 0, there's nothing he really can do with it. Just then, Asuna arrives with an escort. She has finally learned her place in the kitchen and maxed out her cooking skill. So Kirito shows her the rabbit he hunted and sends her to make his lunch quickly. But since it's a rare item they're looking at, over-demanding Asuna demands half of it when she's done something appropriate with it. Since Kirito probably doesn't even own 2 pots to bang together, Asuna decides to use her place instead and invites him to come along. But her escort, Kirito, is against the idea and figures that Kirito is a filthy little beater. Despite his protests, Asuna orders the clapped simp to go back home and cry alone, then tugs Kirito along with her. They get to Asuna's crib, and Kirito learns that it cost her 4 million call to furnish. As he takes a seat and reflects on how broke he is, Asuna goes to change into something more comfortable. Afterwards, she goes to work on his meat, the rabbit meat, like a champ, while Kirito watches. Both of them have a feast, and they begin to talk about how they and other players are now comfortable without touching grass, but Asuna says that she'd still like to go back to reality. Kirito takes a sip from his tea, and Asuna can smell that he's about to propose and shuts him down beforehand. After that, she begins to worry if he'll be okay as a solo player, because the monsters after the 70th floor are much harder, and asks him to party up with her. Kirito believes he'll still be okay, but Asuna wasn't taking no for an answer. The next day, Kirito waits around for her when a wild Asuna pops right out of the portal and lands on top of him. That's when Kirito's inner man of culture awakens, and he starts testing the game's jiggle physics. Asuna, surprised by this, smacks him with divine strength into a nearby pillar. Shortly after, Kirito arrives to take Asuna back to their guild headquarters. Apparently, Mr. Simp, Stalker Edition, has even been spying on her in the name of protecting her. So he goes to drag her back to HQ, but Kirito stops him, saying he sucks at his job. The dude gets pissed off and challenges Kirito to a duel. Once the duel begins, the 2 fighters charge at each other, and Kirito breaks the guy's sword in one hit. He brings out a dagger and tries to attack once again, but Asuna intercepts the attack. At this point, Kirito gets all salty, calling Kirito a lowly beater. But Asuna shuts him up and orders him to sit his useless cakes down at HQ. Once Kirito leaves, Kirito and Asuna head to the 74th floor and tag team the monsters there. Then they find the boss room and decide to check it out while holding a teleport crystal in case of an emergency. Once they enter the room, a bunch of blue torches light up, and the boss that looks like it never missed the gym, called the Gleam Eyes, begins swinging its massive sword, causing Kirito and Asuna to run away. The two of them get to somewhere safe, and they know the boss won't be easy to beat. Kirito mentions that they'll need shieldsmen, and this talk of shields makes Asuna curious about Kirito's sword-only playstyle. She also points out the fact that he's not using the sword Lisbeth made, but eventually drops the curiosity and decides to have lunch with him. After a while, Klein and his team arrive. He spots Kirito and goes to meet him, then notices Asuna and introduces himself just as any beta virgin would. From there, a game of Virgin Unknown Battleground breaks loose, until a guild called the Aincrad Liberation Force comes marching in, looking all exhausted. The leader named Kovacs introduces himself and demands the map data of the dungeon out of nowhere. Asuna and Klein object to his demands, but Kirito agrees to hand it over either way. However, he points out the fact that their team looks exhausted and advises him not to take on the boss. But Kovacs disregards the warning and marches away with his team. A while later, Kirito and the rest fight some monsters to grind for XP, then they suddenly hear a scream. They rush to the boss room where it came from and see the ALF guild players in trouble. And just like that, the boss kills them one by one. Asuna couldn't stand to watch as they got slaughtered, so she joins the battle, with Kirito and the others soon to follow. She attacks with her toothpick sword, but the monster punches her away. Then Kirito steps in to save her while the others rescue the injured players. As Kirito struggles with the monster, he realizes that he'll have to whip out his special move. So he asks Klein and Asuna to keep the monster busy for a moment while he prepares. After he readies up, he charges in, bringing out the Dark Repulsor to dual-wield his swords. Afterward, he uses a skill called Starburst Steam to slice up the jacked-up cow while taking some hits until he finally defeats the beast. At this point, he is down to 1 HP, and he just passes out. When he wakes up, Asuna is all worried about him and cries all over him. Then Klein asks about the skill Kirito used earlier. He explains that it's a unique skill called Dual Wield that just popped up out of nowhere in his skill list a little while ago. So he kept it a secret because MMO players do be jealous at times. Klein tells him to take it as part of his training, and as he leaves, he expresses his happiness for Kirito jumping in to save the ALF players. Meanwhile, there's Asuna, who's still hugging on Kirito, and then she announces that she'll be taking a break from her guild to focus on the party with him. That's when my guy realizes that he's got this one in the bag. Much later, Kirito and Agile go through the stories published about the boss encounter. Then, Asuna dashes in and drags Kirito back to her guild commander, Heathcliff. He's against the idea of Kirito making off with their vice commander, so he challenges him to a duel where, if he wins, he gets to take her. But if he loses, he'll have to join the Knights of Blood. Of course, Kirito accepts the duel since it's his chance to rightfully earn a nice set of cheeks like a real man. When the time for the duel arrives, Asuna calls him stupid for accepting the fight and warns him about Heathcliff's Holy Sword skill, which greatly increases his offense and defense abilities. But even with that OP ability, Kirito is determined not to lose. In the arena, Heathcliff is confident that Kirito will join their guild. He sends him the duel invite, and Kirito accepts the duel that is set to First Strike mode. Once the countdown timer elapses, Kirito goes straight to slashing with his dual-wielded swords, but Heathcliff defends easily and bashes Kirito with his shield. After complementing each other's skills, they go back to slashing each other, and then Kirito manages to graze Heathcliff with his sword. He keeps up the attack from there, finally breaking his opponent's defense. But suddenly, Heathcliff perfectly parries the attack and knocks Kirito away, making him the winner. Now that Kirito has lost, he's now a member of the Knights of Blood. This makes Asuna ask why he prefers to be alone, so he explains the incident that happened with the moonlit black cats. After hearing the story, Asuna goes to comfort him, assuring him that she won't be the one to die this time around. Some time later, a guild member named Godfrey tells Kirito that he'll be going to a dungeon on the 55th floor for skill assessment. As Kirito goes to meet Godfrey at a gate, he learns that he'll be going with Kirito, Asuna's ugly cake's bodyguard from before. On the journey, the team takes a break, and Godfrey passes out the chow. Kirito takes a sip of the water that was given to him, but after seeing Kirito, he quickly realizes that something is wrong. It turns out the water was laced with a paralysis poison, and now both Godfrey and Kirito are unable to move. Godfrey tries using an antidote crystal, but Kirito kicks it away and begins stabbing him until he dies. Then he turns his attention to Kirito and reveals that he's a member of the Laughing Coffin. He begins stabbing Kirito's limbs, bringing him down to low health. But luckily, Asuna blasts on in, just in time, and heals him. She figured that something was up since Godfrey's marker had disappeared and rushed to see what happened. So, she's shredding on Kirito, making him surrender and beg for mercy. However, Asuna hesitates to drop the final blow, which gives him a chance to disarm her and attack. Kirito rushes in and blocks the attack with his arm, losing a hand for his efforts, and plunges his other hand straight into his chest, killing Kirito. After that happens, Asuna begins to cry, blaming herself for everything, and decides to stay away from Kirito. But he, on the other hand, stops her and goes in for a kiss instead.
Yeah, boy.
At that moment, he promises to never leave her side and says that he would like to stay with her that night. When the night arrives, they have dinner at Asuna's place. Then, she goes to turn off the lights and takes off her clothes, letting Kirito get a full glimpse of her exposed plots. But all this is too much for Kirito's virgin brain to take in, so he explains that he just wanted to spend some time with her. Of course, even with a signal as bright as day, he still fumbled the bag, so Asuna gets upset and knocks some sense into him. Later on that night, Asuna wakes up in bed and tells Kirito how glad she is that she met him, and also asks if they can take a break from the front lines. Kirito agrees with this, then proposes to get married, and Asuna gladly agrees. The next day, Kirito and Asuna report what happened and request a leave of absence. Heathcliff agrees to this request, even though he's sure that they'll return to battle soon. With that, both of them go to spend their honeymoon in a log cabin on the 22nd floor. One day, both of them go for a walk, and Asuna asks to ride him.
Yeah, boy.
Kirito says it's nowhere near the right time or place for something like that. But since no one was watching, he eventually agrees, and Asuna prepares to ride his shoulders, letting her get a good view. As they venture through the forest, Kirito brings up some story about a ghost, which scares Asuna. But then, they spot a girl in the distance who falls over shortly. They rush to check on her and believe that she may be a bugged character since they couldn't find a player indicator on her, so they decide to carry the girl back to their house. The next day, the girl wakes up, but she can't remember anything other than her name, Yui. Kirito and Asuna introduce themselves, but she fails to comprehend their names and sticks to calling them Papa and Mama. Now they have a lost little child on their hands. After all that riding in the woods, Kirito and Asuna decide to head to the town of beginnings to see if anyone might recognize her. When they arrive, they notice how oddly quiet it is, despite the large number of players in the town. Then, they hear someone yelling, which comes from a daycare owner named Sasha. Some players of the Aincrad Liberation Force are trying to extort taxes from her and 3 other children in her care. But fortunately, Kirito and Asuna arrive, leaping over the wall of soldiers, and go to check on the children. The ALF guys aren't having it, so one of them brings up a challenge. That's when Asuna steps up with her sword and traumatizes the background character by knocking him around since HP can't be lost in safe areas, causing the cowards to retreat. While Sasha and the children thank Asuna, Yui begins to reach for the sky, panicking. Then suddenly, she starts to tweak out and falls unconscious. The next day, Kirito and Asuna tell their story of how they found Yui. But then, a member of the ALF, Yulier, pays them a visit. She apologizes for the incident that happened and explains how their once peaceful guild changed to something else when a player named Kiba came to power. Not only that, but he also trapped the guild's leader, Thinker, in a high-level dungeon for 3 days, and now she's come to ask for help. At first, Kirito and Asuna think she might be lying, but they eventually agree to help, and Yui insists on coming along. They arrive at the dungeon and find the safe area Thinker is in. Yulia rushes ahead to meet him, but they get ambushed by a boss called the Fatal Scythe. Yulia takes Yui to the safe area and prepares to teleport away with Thinker. Meanwhile, Kirito and Asuna take on the boss, but they are quickly overwhelmed. Then Yui comes out of the safe area and goes right for the boss. The monster attacks but is unable to harm her, revealing that she's an immortal object. Yui then creates a massive flaming sword and easily defeats the monster in a single swing. When that's done, Yui reveals that she's gotten back her memories. She tells them about a system called Cardinal that is responsible for controlling the game's mechanics, and she was added to the game as an emotional support character for the players. However, she was locked away and could do nothing but observe all the players' negative emotions. Then she noticed Kirito and Asuna, who were always positive, and wanted to meet them. Afterward, Yui reveals a console that Grandmasters used to the system, which let her take care of the boss. But now, she's been sentenced to deletion after interfering with the game. When she finally gets wiped out, Kirito quickly gets to the console and does some fancy hacker magic until he gets blasted away. Then he gives Asuna a teardrop-shaped item, revealing that he turned Yui's code into a game item. On the 22nd floor, Kirito goes fishing and gains a good amount of nothing. Then he gets a fisherman jump-scare moment from a man named Nishida. It doesn't take long until the man catches a fish, but despite his skill, he's unable to cook it. So, Kirito invites him over and Asuna prepares a meal. Once they're done, Asuna mentions Kirito's trash fishing skill and how he always catches nothing from the lakes around them. But Nishida explains that the one he's been fishing in is a difficult lake. The reason for this is because of a certain fish Nishida has been unable to catch, so he asks Kirito for his help. The next day, there's a fishing event to catch the river beast. Nishida casts his line and waits for the perfect moment. Once it hooks, he gives the line to Kirito, who struggles at first, but eventually pulls up a massive monster fish. The monster charges towards them, but Asuna manages to take it out easily and the residents applaud her. Out of nowhere, Kirito receives a message from Heathcliff. As the two of them head out, they talk with Nishida, who mentions how he felt so hopeless about being stuck in the game, so he spent all his time fishing. Asuna relates with him, then she mentions how she met Kirito, who changed her view, and eventually got the feels for him. Nishida agrees with her point of view that life is worth living and wishes them luck on their journey. Then we get to the Knights of Blood HQ, and Heathcliff briefs Kirito and Asuna on what happened. He explains that a party of 20 players was sent to check out the boss on the 75th floor. Once 10 of them got in, they were trapped in the room, and there was no trace of the players or the boss when the room reopened. So he wants to form an attack party to storm the boss, and Kirito agrees to participate. However, he states that he'll prioritize rescuing his baby girl over anyone else. With 3 hours left to the boss raid, Kirito tells Asuna not to participate in the battle since he's scared of losing her. He confesses that he just wants to have a quiet time with Asuna, even if it's not the real world. But Asuna tells him that they still have to go touch some grass, plus their real bodies could eventually die if they remain in the game, which meant that they had a limited time to clear the game. Later on, they arrive at the 75th floor, where they meet up with the team, including Agile and Klein. After that, the team arrives before the boss room, and Heathcliff discusses the strategy. When that's done, the players charge into the room, and the door shuts itself. After not seeing anything for a while, they finally spot the boss called the Skull Reaper on the ceiling. It drops down and one-hit KOs a couple of players while zooming around. With how strong it is, Kirito, Asuna, and Heathcliff decide to take on the monster's attacks, while the rest of the team attack from the sides. The battle goes on for a while, and thanks to that strategy, they eventually bring the monster's health down. Now it's on low HP, they all jump the monster at once until it finally dies. Despite the victory, 14 people died, and the exhausted players wonder if they'll ever reach the top since there are 25 more floors of hell to get through. On the other hand, Kirito observes Heathcliff from a distance. Suddenly, he decides to attack him out of nowhere, but instead of the attack hitting, Heathcliff doesn't take any damage. Kirito realizes that Heathcliff's health wouldn't drop to the yellow zone no matter what and finally exposes him as Kayaba Akihiko, the creator of the game. Kirito came to this realization because he always had a feeling that there was something going on. So, Heathcliff reveals that Kirito was so good that he was pretty much overwhelmed, which made him activate his hacks to counter. Eventually, Heathcliff reveals he's the final boss of the game. A player is outraged by this and tries to attack, but Heathcliff paralyzes him and everyone else in the room, except Kirito. He gives him a chance to have a duel, and if Kirito wins, everyone will be free from the game. At first, Asuna tries to warn him against it, but after remembering everyone who died, Kirito goes fuck and accepts the challenge. Before Kirito goes to battle, he asks Heathcliff to prevent Asuna from unaliving herself if he dies. Heathcliff agrees to the request. Then he deactivates his hacks and prepares for the deathmatch. When it begins, Kirito charges ahead, slashing with his dual wield. Since he's dealing with the creator of that skill, he figures that he'll have to fight without using sword skills. The battle goes on, and Heathcliff manages to cut Kirito's face, causing him to increase the offense. But unfortunately for him, his sword breaks after hitting Heathcliff's shield. From there, Heathcliff counters, and just as he's about to deliver the final blow, Asuna jumps between them and sacrifices herself. After her body disappears, Kirito picks up Asuna's sword and tries to keep fighting, all sad and everything. But Heathcliff easily deflects his sword and puts him out of his misery. Kirito's health reaches 0, but thanks to the power of guts and plot armor for ages, he reappears for a moment, still fighting, and kills Heathcliff, clearing the game. After the battle, Kirito finds himself in a different part of the world where he sees Asuna once again. They both get a view of the game's world and watch as it crumbles. Then Akihiko shows up in person. He reveals that everything about Sword Art Online is being wiped away at the moment, and around 6,000 people have survived the game. Kirito asks why he made the whole death game thing, and Akihiko explains that he wanted to create a world that he's been longing for since he was young. Then he congratulates Kirito and Asuna for clearing the game and vanishes. After that, it's now time for Kirito and Asuna to disappear. They reveal their real names as Kirigeya Kazuto and Yuuki Asuna to each other. Then they both share their final feelings and embrace each other as the world falls apart. Not long after, Kirito wakes up in the real world. He takes off the nerve gear, and immediately, he goes searching for Asuna. Sometime later in the real world, after waking up from a nightmare, Kirito goes to meet his sister Suguha. After talking for a while, Kirito picks up her shinai, calling it light, and this surprises Suguha since it should be heavy. Confident in the experience he's gotten from swinging digital swords, Kirito challenges Suguha to a duel, and she, on the other hand, is more than glad to give Kirito a reality check on his skills. They get to the dojo and suit up for a match. Suguha holds her sword like a normal person, while Kirito is out there posing with that MC energy, thanks to the game he's been playing. The duel begins, and Suguha decides to end things quickly by striking his face. But Kirito is playing no games and manages to hold up. But even with that, Suguha still gets the better of him and strikes his head, winning the match. After that training session, Kirito says that he wants to check on Asuna in the hospital. 2 months ago, after clearing the game, Kirito told a few officials all the info he knew in exchange for Asuna's location. He goes to check on her and sees that she's still in a coma, along with 300 other players. Shortly, Asuna's father, Shuzu, drops by with his partner's son, Sugu. After meeting the hero of SAO, Sugu mentions something about seeing Asuna in a wedding dress, which leaves Kirito in shock. Then Shuzu immediately bounces, saying he has a meeting, leaving Sugu and Kirito alone in the room. With the dad gone, Sugu decides to let his freak flag fly. He goes to sniff Asuna's hair and reveals that he'll be getting married to her, regardless of her condition. He confesses that Asuna actually can't stand him, but now anything is on the table, with her unconscious, possibly never to awaken. Kirito goes to stop Sugu from being all freaky around her, and that's when he makes a big reveal. Sugu says that Rect, a company where Asuna's father is the CEO, is in charge of maintaining the game's server, and he is in charge of the tech research department, so essentially, he's responsible for keeping her alive. And with that, Sugu leaves, telling Kirito not to show his ugly, sweaty face to Asuna ever again. Back at home, Suguha goes to check on her brother, who's all depressed, hiding in his cold dark room. She then recalls a time when Kirito was still trapped in SAO, and her mother tells her about the time when Kirito figured out that she and Kirito are actually cousins. Afterwards, she gets into bed next to Kirito, wishing his heart and more belonged to her instead of Asuna. In the morning, Kirito wakes her up, and she eventually gets up, all embarrassed, and rushes out of the room. Shortly, Kirito receives an email containing an image of Asuna's avatar, and is surprised to see that. Afterwards, he goes to meet with Agil in real life, who's actually the person who sent the email, and asks about it. That's when Agil shows him a video game called Alfheim Online, which is basically a sword art online ripoff. But instead, this one focuses more on magic. Killing others is perfectly safe, and the players are fairies who can fly. Agil pulls out the photos that he sent in the mail. He explains that there's a massive tree called the World Tree, and the players compete against each other to reach a castle at the top. A team of 5 players tried to fly there using a combined effort, but it didn't work. However, they took a bunch of pictures, including a photo of a birdcage, and once they zoomed in, that's how they got the photo of Asuna. Kirito takes a look at the game, and after seeing it's a game by Rect, he remembers Sugu, the freak champ, and immediately decides to hop on. He rushes home, driven by the vision of finally clapping cheeks, and puts on his nerve gear. He logs into the game, creates his character, and picks the Spriggan race. When he's done, he starts free falling into his race's hometown, but he suddenly freezes in mid-air and gets teleported into a random forest. First things first, Kirito rushes to check if the game is also a trap stuck in death mode, and he's relieved to find that the logout button is actually there. Then he checks his stats, noticing how they're the same as in SAO, then finds he still has the item containing Yui's data. Once he taps on it, a wild Yui appears, and she recognizes him. Kirito informs her that they're in a different game, but Yui can tell that they're in a copy of SAO's server with a few differences in the game. Kirito wonders about his skills, and Yui explains that some of his compatible skills from SAO were carried over. Unfortunately, all of his items are corrupted, so he deletes them from his inventory. This time, rather than being a defect, Yui has been made into a navigation pixie, and she transforms to play the part. With that, Kirito explains that Asuna was sent to Alfheim, and she's being held at the World Tree. That's when Yui shows him the game's flying controller and gives him a quick flight tutorial. But then she warns him that he can only fly for a limited amount of time. Shortly, Yui senses other players nearby. These players are Lifa and Rikan, who are trying to escape a race of fairies called salamanders. After being chased for a while, the two sylphs decide to fight. Lifa does well to hold her ground, but the other one, Rikan, gets killed. After that, Lifa gets shot out of the sky thanks to a fireball. On the ground, the enemies surround her, but she refuses to surrender. That's when Kirito faceplants himself right in the middle of it, and he already knows that he has to save the girl. With that, the soldiers change targets, and Kirito is more than ready to flex and mop the floor with these thugs. Even though he just rescued her, Lifa is suspicious of Kirito at first, but she eventually calms down and introduces herself. She thanks him for saving her and offers to buy him a drink. Kirito, on the other hand, is curious about the game's world, especially the World Tree. She agrees to share all the info she knows once they get to Swilvain, the town of sylphs. Lifa brings out her wings, ready to fly, and this makes Kirito wonder how she's able to fly without a controller. So, Lifa shows him how to do that by touching him, and he quickly rises up, like a virgin, overly sensitive to touch. At first, he's unable to control himself, but he gets the hang of it after a while. After that, both of them fly around, racing each other, until they reach Swilvain. Unfortunately, Kirito remembers that he doesn't know how to land, so Lifa bails on him while he crashes into a tower, but she still goes to heal him using high-level healing magic. In town, they meet up with Lifa's partner, Rikan, who informs Lifa that Sigurd was waiting for her. However, she declines the invitation, intending to keep her promise to Kirito. The two of them stop at a pub, and Lifa thanks him once again for the rescue. She then explains the whole thing about the world tree, saying that it's every race's goal to get to the top. She reveals that all the races can only fly for 10 minutes at a time. However, the first race to reach the city at the top and get to the Fairy King, Oberon, will have all of their members turn into elves who can fly for as long as they like. But to reach the top, they'll have to get to a dome at the tree's base, which is guarded by powerful NPC guardians. No one has been able to defeat them, so a popular theory is that there's a key quest that has been overlooked. With how it's going, Leafa suggests that it may take several years before anyone ever reaches the city. But Kirito is super determined to get there and wants it now, so he decides to get going regardless of how difficult it is. After seeing how much determination he has, Leafa volunteers to take Kirito there. She tells him to meet her the next day and logs out. When she does, we learn that Leafa is actually Suguha in real life. Meanwhile, there's Asuna, who's stuck in the giant cage. A certain player enters, and we learn that he's Oberon the Fairy King, aka Sugu's avatar. He asks Asuna to marry him and become his queen, but she rejects him instantly. However, Bro wasn't taking no for an answer. He goes to have a look at Asuna's plots, but eventually decides not to spoil the story for himself. From there, he reveals how the full dive system is capable of manipulating people's brains, adding how he now has control over the 300 players who remained unconscious, including Asuna. As you'd expect, this research is pretty much illegal, but Oberon reveals that it's being done in secret and is selling the results to make big bucks. He then enters a secret passcode to open the gate. Asuna tries to look at it, but it's all blurry. When he leaves, Asuna gets on her knees, hoping that Kirito will rescue her. Back in reality, Suguha begins to think about how things went from "I'll never touch this game" that has taken Kirito away to racking up as many hours on the game, like an average VR chat player. Later on, she runs into professional nerd Nagata, who is one of her party members, Recon, in the game. He's there to let her know the party is going hunting later that day, but she says she won't be joining them, and adds that she'll be away from the group to guide Kirito to the base of the world tree. Nagata, clearly simping for her, isn't happy about this at all, but Suguha smacks some sense into him, refuses to elaborate, and leaves. At the end of the day, Suguha heads home and prepares to go online. She logs back in as her usual character and meets Kirito, who just logs in as well. First off, he realizes that he probably needs an equipment upgrade for the journey, so both of them go shopping, then to the tower where they'll take off from. At the base of the tower, they run into Sigurd, the leader of Leafa's party. He expresses his disappointment about her leaving the party, all focused on how it will affect his reputation, without a care about what Leafa thinks. Kirito steps up after hearing that, saying that players shouldn't be treated like equipment. That's when he gets a taste of RPG racism. But Leafa warns Sigurd about that and declares Kirito as her new partner. At this point, Sigurd is ready to draw swords, but his teammate tells him that others are watching, which makes him back off and leave. In the end, both of them get to the top of the tower and fly away. Back at the World Tree, Oberon is trying to get laid, but Asuna does her best to stay put. She mentions how she'll be saved eventually, and Oberon knows she's talking about Kirito. He reveals how they met in the real world and told him that he'll be getting married. But Asuna doesn't care about his mocking and is relieved to hear that Kirito is alive. After that, Oberon enters the key code to leave once again, but this time Asuna watches as he inputs it through a reflection. Meanwhile, Kirito and Leafa grind for XP. Their wings start to fade, so they decide to take a break. Leafa reveals that they'll have to go through some caves in the mountains since it'll be impossible to fly over them. Since that's the case, she suggests that they take turns logging out to take a break. With that, Leafa logs out first, and Suguha returns to the real world. She goes to check on Kirito, but believes he might still be depressed, and leaves him be. Then she goes to have a shower and begins battling her feelings for the new person she met in the game. After a while, she returns, and it's Kirito's turn to log out. While he's offline, Yui comes out of Kirito's pocket, which surprises Leafa. When asked, Yui explains that she calls Kirito Papa because he saved her and made her his daughter. From there, they talk about what it means to love someone, a topic Leafa is too embarrassed to continue. Shortly, Kirito returns, and both of them continue their journey. The duo arrives at the caves and can see through the darkness thanks to Kirito's night vision magic. While Kirito tries memorizing a few spells he can use, Leafa gets a message from Recon telling her to be careful, but the rest of it is missing. Yui reveals they're being followed, so Leafa and Kirito move into a corner and conceal themselves with illusion magic. Kirito spots a bat in the distance, and Leafa immediately decides to kill it since it's an enemy tracer. After that, both of them start to run, realizing they're being followed by a team of salamanders. As they approach the town's gate, a huge rock wall pops up and blocks their path, leaving them with no other option but to fight. Before they do, Kirito tells Leafa to stay behind and support with healing magic while he attacks. He charges ahead, attacking the players, but fails to break the formation of the ones with shields. Then the salamander mages counter with fireballs, but Leafa is there to heal Kirito. The same thing goes on for a while, but Kirito refuses to give up and brute forces his way through the enemy's formation. Then Yui instructs Leafa to cast a protection spell on Kirito, and she does that, protecting him from a wave of fireballs. Within the shield, Kirito uses an illusion spell that transforms him into the Gleam Eyes boss, and he goes sicko mode on the salamanders. However, he spares the last one. Leafa goes to get some info out of the guy, but he refuses to budge. Then Kirito returns to his normal form, commends the person for their strategy, and bribes the guy with all the loot he got from the battle. The player explains that they were ordered to hunt down Kirito and Leafa since they were interfering with certain plans, but he wasn't told what the plans were. So with that, they give the guy the promised loot and head into the town of Legru. Kirito reminds Leafa about the message she received from Recon, but he's offline, so she decides to log out and call him in real life. Back in the real world, Suguha picks up her phone, and Recon calls her immediately. He reveals that Sigurd betrayed them and is working as a spy for the salamanders. He says that the leader of the Sylphs, Sakuya, will be forming an alliance with the Kate Siths, but Sigurd plans to invade the ceremony with a huge army of salamanders. After hearing that, Leafa suddenly decides to leave when she logs in. As she and Kirito head out of town, she explains everything, including the fact the conference will be held at the Butterfly Valley. Kirito wonders why they would attack, so Leafa explains that killing a territory's leader grants 30% of the territory's treasury, plus taxes for 10 days. Leafa realizes that if the salamanders pull that off, they'll have enough resources to storm the World Tree, so she tells Kirito she wouldn't blame him if he switches sides. However, he says no, adding that he won't be turning against her just for his benefit, even though it's a game. So with that, he takes her hand and dashes off with her. They zoom past several monsters, jump out of the caves, and begin flying to their destination. On the way there, they spot the salamander army heading for the meeting. With how things are looking, Leafa tells Kirito to go for the World Tree, but he's not the kind of person to back out like that. With the salamanders now at the venue, Kirito suddenly drops in. He tells everyone to slow their roll and asks to speak with their commander, Eugene. Kirito claims to be an ambassador of the Spriggans and Undines. Then he bluffs that the salamanders will be up against all 4 of the other races if they attack. But Eugene says it's all cap and challenges Kirito to a duel instead. Sakuya recognizes the sword Eugene is using as a demon sword called Graham that requires a 2-handed sword skill level of 950 to use. On top of that, Eugene's warrior status earned him the title of the strongest player in the game. Suddenly, Eugene attacks. Kirito tries to block, but Eugene's sword phases through his defense and hits Kirito, thanks to its ethereal shift ability. But Kirito recovers, and both of them fight in midair. Eventually, Kirito starts receiving damage, so he retreats and casts a smoke spell that covers the whole area. After that, he uses the chance to borrow Leafa's sword. Then Eugene clears the smoke in the area with one swing. At first, everyone wonders where Kirito is, but he dives in with the sun behind him, coming in for an attack, and manages to defend against Eugene's wall hack sword thanks to his dual-wield ability. From there, he counters, slicing up Eugene, and wins the duel. When it's all over, everyone is blown away by the battle they just witnessed, and Sakuya revives Eugene. He commends Kirito's ability, acknowledging him as the strongest player he's ever fought, and finally buys in that he really is an ambassador. With that, he decides not to start a world war and takes his leave. Then, the two fairies explain what caused the issue to Sakuya. However, Sakuya is not surprised that it's Sigurd behind it since he's always been so power-hungry. Since an upcoming game update will bring race conversion reincarnation thingy, she figured that Sigurd wanted to move to the Rising Salamanders in exchange for taking out his leader. But thanks to the leader of the Kate Siths, Alicia, she creates a moonlight mirror, which allows Sakuya to contact Sigurd and banish him on the spot. After that, Kirito admits that there was never any Spriggan Undyne alliance, and the two baddie leaders try rizzing Kirito up to get him to their side, but he declines both of them. Later on, he learns that the alliance is being formed between the two races so they can conquer the world tree. So he donates a fat bag of cash to help them prepare for the task, and with that, the leaders thank him and leave with the group. Meanwhile, back at the top of the tree, Asuna, who is still trapped in the cage, finally gets up and enters the code she learned earlier to set herself free. Kirito and Lifa finally arrive at Elne, the city at the base of the world tree. As they're busy admiring the place, there's an announcement for server maintenance, telling the players to log out. They agree, but Kirito asks Yui to find a cheap inn where they can stay, since Kirito gave away all his cash. Back to Asuna, she makes her escape, running and hiding Mission Impossible style. Then she finds a mysteriously lit hallway. She cautiously goes through the tunnel, looking for a server console she can use to log out. After a while, she arrives at a strange room with a bunch of holographic brains on pedestals. After remembering what Oberon said about the experiments, she realizes it's the room where the 300 players are being experimented on. She wonders what to do next. Then some ugly-ass slug creatures show up, who turn out to be scientists working on the experiment. Asuna goes to hide from the creatures. Then she spots a strange cube, realizing it's the system console. After finding the perfect chance, she manages to access the console and finds the logout button. Just as she's about to press it, the ugly snail stops her. Back in reality, Kirito and Suguha go to the hospital to visit Asuna. While that happens, Asuna is fighting the slug, trying to log out. She explains that she's friends with Sugu, but they aren't buying it. Instead, they recognize that she's his pet. After stopping her second attempt at logging out, Asuna questions how they could partake in such an inhumane experiment. But just like what any PETA worker would do, they're completely fine with experimenting on humans. So, Snail number 1 tells number 2 to go ask their boss what they should do. When number 2 logs off, number 1 decides to recreate his browser's search history on Asuna. But she bites the guy's tentacle. Shortly, Snail number 2 logs back in with orders from their boss to put her back in the cage and change the passcode. Back in the hospital, Kirito and Suguha watch over Asuna. As she goes to change the water in a flower pot, she starts to feel a little sad when she sees Kirito tending to Asuna. Meanwhile, Asuna is sent back to her cage, but she refuses to give up and manages to get a system access card. Kirito and Lifa log back in, and he notices how she's sad. When he asks what's wrong, Lifa begins to cry, saying that her heart has been broken. But Kirito, being the man he is, goes to comfort her. From there, he suggests that she log out, believing he can handle everything alone. But now that she's calm, Lifa decides that she'll accompany him to the end. They head to the base of the world tree, and just as they arrive, Yui immediately senses Asuna from above. After hearing that, Kirito doesn't waste any time and starts flying towards the top. After he zooms off, Lifa tries her best to keep up, wondering if the person he's going for is really worth it. Kirito keeps on flying until he hits a barrier and attempts to break through it, while Lifa tries to calm him down. Back to Asuna, she somehow hears Yui's voice through the game's warning system. She looks around, trying to find where it's coming from, and then considers throwing something from the cage. Then we get back to Kirito, who is doing everything he can to break the barrier. After a while, a card drops from the sky, and the players wonder what it is. Yui takes a look and reveals that it's a system administrator access code, which gives a player admin rights to the system. But to do that, they'll have to find a support console. With how an item like that just appeared, they figure that Asuna must have heard Yui. Kirito asks Lifa where the gate to the world tree is. She mentions that it's inside the dome, but a big batch of guardians are defending the place. Even after hearing that, Kirito decides to go alone and thanks her for the support she's been providing. With that, Kirito dives into the ground and doesn't waste any time heading to the dome. Yui informs him that the task will be very difficult, but Kirito doesn't care since he can't stand there and do nothing. He arrives at the dome's entrance, and as he approaches, the giant statues by the side block the path, asking if he wants to climb the tree. Kirito accepts the quest, and with that, he prepares for battle and heads in. He arrives in a dark room that suddenly gets lit up by some strange-looking mirrors. As soon as he starts to fly, Guardian number 1 spawns in, and Kirito defeats it easily. Shortly, a ton of them spawn in, but Kirito keeps on fighting ruthlessly, powered by the will to clap some cheeks. He keeps on fighting the monsters while taking damage and still flying upwards. Then he gets hit by an arrow, and now he's facing archers. They fire a ton of their arrows at him, but Kirito keeps on going despite all the damage. Finally, he gets stabbed by several massive swords and dies. Now that he's dead, he waits for the respawn timer. While waiting, he realizes that anime willpower alone is not enough to get past the game. From there, he recalls his time in SAO, and while in thought, a guardian flies over him and prepares for battle. That's when he spots Leafa in the dome as she manages to weave her way through the guardians. She goes up, gets his revive fire thing, and makes her way out. While flying, she gets hit with arrows from the guardians and falls to the ground. Even with that close call, she still manages to escape. Outside the dome, Leafa revives Kirito. Now that he's back to life, he thanks Leafa for the assist, but tells her not to risk her life for him again since he's bothered her enough. Then he immediately heads back for the dome, since there's no other way. Leafa rushes to stop him and tries to confess her love, but Kirito apologizes and states that he has to see Asuna. Leafa is shocked to hear that name, and she suddenly realizes that Kirito is the same cousin of hers that she knows. She then calls him Big Brother, which lets Kirito realize that Leafa is Suguha. Surprised by this turn of events, she quickly logs out of the game. Back in the real world, Suguha begins to cry. Kirito tries to check on her and apologizes for using the nerve gear, thinking that's why she's upset. So she opens up the door and explains that she tried forgetting about Kazuto by falling in love with Kirito, just to find out it's the same person. Kirito tries to tell her that they're siblings, but she reveals that she found out they're actually cousins. After saying how her feelings were hurt, Suguha shuts the door in his face to go cry while Kirito remains by her door. With Kazuto and Suguha all sad, Kazuto remembers when he discovered the truth about his parents, so he turned to online gaming as a way to escape that fact. But after the time he spent in Sword Art Online, Kirito learned that the real and virtual worlds are basically the same. After a while of thinking, he tells Suguha that he'll be waiting on the North Terrace in Aulnay. Suguha, on the other hand, begins to feel sorry for how she treated Kirito, so she picks up her VR gear and gets back online. In the game, Leafa meets Recon, who wonders where Kirito is. Leafa says that she said horrible things to him and begins to leave, adding that he won't come back. While leaving sad, Recon catches up, tries to confess his love, and kisses her. But Leafa sends the nerd tumbling down the stairs. When he recovers, he mentions how he thought what he needed was the courage to just do it. But Leafa tells him he's an idiot, then admits that she can learn from his example. Meanwhile, Kirito waits for Leafa on the North Terrace. Before anything else, she challenges Kirito to a duel to finish up the match they started before. When the duel begins, they both fight for a bit, then take things to the sky, where they land on some other platforms. The two of them prepare to charge at each other, but midway, Leafa lets go of her sword and falls. Kirito catches her in the air, and then they hug each other and apologize. Later on, they get back to the dome's gates, and Leafa explains to Recon that they'll all be going through the world tree. Kirito summons Yui, and from their last fight, she reveals that the Guardians aren't strong, but they spawn too quickly and there are so many, making it pretty difficult. But with their skill levels, she informs them that they can break through for a moment. So with that, they decide to take on the challenge. Kirito takes on the Guardians again, with Recon and Leafa healing him from behind. He goes ahead, slaying them all, but more of them keep coming. After healing Kirito, the Guardians suddenly target the two sylphs, thanks to having a different algorithm from other enemies. Leafa decides to go ahead, but Recon stops her. While he's confused about the whole rescue operation, he goes to battle using his magic, slicing the enemies to draw their attention. Then he starts to use a dark magic spell, which also turns out to be self-destruct, to create a gap in the dome of Guardians. Kirito sees the chance to go ahead, but he gets blocked by a wall of Guardians and stabbed several times, and the gap gets sealed up. Leafa begins to heal Kirito, realizing how hopeless the situation is, and she gets surrounded. But then, an army of sylphs and Kate Siths shows up along with their leaders, Sakuya and Alicia, and they go ahead to attack the Guardians. Leafa thanks them for the support, and they explain that they were only able to prepare thanks to the money Kirito donated. So, they go to slay some Guardians while Kirito and Leafa fight back to back. Eventually, there's a gap in the sea of mobs again, and Kirito rushes for it. Another group of Guardians charges at him, so Leafa passes her sword, which Kirito uses to pull off a skill that lets him drill through the sea of Guardians. With him now on the other side, the troops retreat since their work is done. On the other side, Kirito wonders how to open the entrance. Yui reveals that it can only be opened by a system administrator. He's surprised to hear that. Then more Guardians spawn in as he wonders what to do. But things finally connect, and Kirito remembers the card he got earlier. So he whips it out. Yui absorbs some of the code and uses it to open the door. From there, they get teleported in. Kirito wakes up and finds himself in a well-lit tunnel. Yui locates Asuna, and they head for her. Eventually, they arrive at the top of the world tree and realize that the whole thing about the grand guest was a lie. Putting the fake promises aside, Kirito spots the cage and rushes towards it. Yui opens the gate, and they are finally reunited with each other. After a while, the area around them turns into some black space, and Yui disappears. Kirito and Asuna try to hold hands, but are forced to the ground. That's when Oberon shows up, and Kirito realizes that he's Sugu, which causes Sugu to kick him for not addressing him properly. After explaining his master plan to Kirito, Sugu summons some chain shackles from the sky, uses them on Asuna's hands, and she gets lifted. When that happens, he goes to do what he does best to Asuna, which makes Kirito try to get up. However, Sugu kicks him to the ground and stabs him using his sword. From there, he uses a system command to reduce the pain absorber to 8, making Kirito feel the pain. Sugu then goes back to Asuna. He removes her plot armor, goes Super Saiyan on her, and even wants to record it, leaving Kirito unable to do anything but watch. At this point, Kirito begins to think that he's not the main character he always thought he was. While he's all depressed, thinking of how powerless he is, plot armor, Akihiko Edition shows up, and he reminds Kirito of their battle and how he transcended the system. Then he tells him to get up. Then there's Sugu, who goes wandering into Asuna's skirt like he's Dora the Explorer. Kirito finally musters up main character strength to stand by sliding up the sword. Sugu goes to slap him, but Kirito grabs his hand, logs in as an admin using Akihiko's ID, and removes Sugu's admin privileges. He's outraged by this, declaring himself the creator of the world, but Kirito says that he pretty much stole it. Angered by this, Sugu tries to use admin privileges to summon Excalibur and fails. So Kirito does it for him and hands over the sword, then grabs his own. After that, he challenges Sugu to a duel, but he doesn't stop there. He sets the pain absorber to level 0, which will let even their real bodies feel pain. Kirito mentions something about Akihiko, and Sugu is upset to learn that even in death, Akihiko still interferes with him. Anyway, he goes to attack and does a pathetic job at it. Then Kirito finally attacks, butchering Sugu like he's doing a Mortal Kombat fatality until only his upper body is left. After that, Kirito carries Sugu, tosses him into the air, and finally finishes him off. When that's done, Kirito frees Asuna from her shackles and immediately begins to cry, admitting that he's powerless. But he swears to live up to the expectations Asuna has for him. With that sorted, Kirito logs her out of the world, and before he leaves, he notices Akihiko present and calls him out. The man's afterimage appears, and Kirito thanks him for the assist. However, Akihiko states that they aren't friends and says that he wants compensation instead. Kirito asks what he should do, so Akihiko gives him an item called the World Seed and leaves from there. Later, Yui reappears, revealing that she stored herself in the local storage of Kirito's nerve gear. Then, Kirito takes one last look at the world and logs out. He wakes up in the real world to find Suguha practically on top of him, worried since he didn't log out for a long while. Kirito thanks her, saying that he wouldn't have gone anywhere without her. Then he reveals that Asuna is back, and Suguha immediately tells him to go to her. So without further ado, he rides his bike in the snowy night to meet Asuna. Once Kirito arrives at the hospital, he gets slashed across his arm. It turns out Sugu has been waiting for him with a knife, and he's out to kill. Kirito dodges his attacks, but falls to the ground, and Sugu starts kicking him like it's after-school soccer practice. After that, he decides it's time to finish him off, but misses due to his bad right eye. He's a bit wobbly as he tries again, and that's when Kirito realizes that people in the real world and the game behave the same. So he decides to be the hero he's known as, stops the blade, and counters Sugu. At this point, Sugu tries to run, but Kirito catches him and places the blade to his throat, but he lets him go in the end. After that fight, Kirito goes to meet Asuna in person. They hug each other, introduce themselves for real, in the real world, and finally kiss. Sometime later, Kirito finishes class, and then he goes to meet Asuna at school. She reveals that her father stepped down as CEO after the incident. Then Sugu was arrested at the hospital parking lot and tried to pin everything on Akihiko. But unfortunately, his former subordinate was brought in, and he confessed to everything that actually happened. Also, the 300 players who were experimented on had no memories of the experiments and were safe and sound. Because of this, the whole VRMMO industry took a massive hit, and Elfheim Online was shut down. Kirito reveals that Akihiko allegedly committed suicide, but did a high-output scan on himself when Sword Art Online collapsed, and put a copy of his consciousness into the internet. While Kirito recalls the meeting with Akihiko, Asuna manages to draw his attention, informing him that there's an offline meeting later in the day. Sometime later, Kirito, Asuna, and Suguha arrive at the meeting place and see that they're already late. Then Kirito is brought up to the stage where everyone congratulates him for clearing Sword Art Online. After that, he catches up with Klein and Thinker, then asks Agile about the World Seed. It turns out the World Seed was a program package that contained code for the VR world Akihiko created. It allows anyone to create their own virtual world on the internet, and Agile uploaded it to servers all over the world so anyone can use it. Thanks to that, the dying VRMMO industry is springing back. Sometime later, Suguha logs in as Lifa and goes flying. She tries to reach the moon but fails and starts falling, then Kirito catches her. She wonders why he isn't using his old avatar from SAO, but he says that Kirito has done his job. Shortly, Lifa dances with Kirito, then says that she'll be going home. When asked why, she explains that she won't be able to catch up to everyone else. So, Kirito grabs her and starts flying towards the world tree. After flying for some distance, Kirito shows her a giant floating castle that comes into view, called New Aincrad. While Lifa's surprised, Kirito explains that he's starting afresh and wants to clear all 100 floors of the castle. After that, the whole crew pulls up, and they all fly towards Aincrad. Thanks for sticking around until the very end. You are the real hero. Comment with VR Rocks if you want the second part. Like, subscribe, and click on one of our other exciting videos on screen. Stay awesome, stay AniGeek.